Hey guys, today we're going to be finishing up Unit 4, our political unit, with just some random bits of information that we need to talk about that is outlined in the course exam guide. And so there's just a little snippets about these in your book, and so we need to wrap everything up because you guys will take your test on Monday. We're going to break it up because I know you don't enjoy always taking notes. So we're going to break it up, and I found some videos, some cool videos that will go along with each of these things that we're going to talk about. So the first thing is that we're going to start with devolution. Remember, we talked about this the other day in class, and we did our slides. So why don't you get on that Jamboard again? Remember, it was just the bit.ly/2a devo, and that'll take you to the Jamboard that we made, and just take a look at those examples, the ones that we didn't get to the other day. Okay. But we're gonna finish off devolution by talking about a few different vocab words that we need to mention that go along with devolution. The first one is called irredentism. Irredentism is just the process of trying to unite people who share the same like cultural elements, but that they might be divided in between different countries or between different states. And so this idea of irredentism is uniting this group of people together. So that's what we're going to write down, is that it's the process of uniting people who share cultural elements but are divided by national boundaries. Okay, so there's lots of examples of this throughout history. One really big one that you might know about if you are interested in World War II like I was, but Nazi Germany actually kind of started their whole reign, I guess, they in World War II, when they believed that there were Germans living in Czechoslovakia at the time. And so they annexed this territory in Czechoslovakia that was supposed to have had a lot of Germans in it. And the term was the Sudetenland. It was this territory. And so they annexed the Sudetenland against everything, against all of the peace treaties and stuff that had happened after World War I. They weren't supposed to do that. And Hitler said, well, forget that. We want the Sudetenland. And so they annexed that because they believed that there were Germans there. And so that's an example of irredentism. The example given in your book is that in the Caucasus Mountain region, which you probably don't know where that is, but it is up in, it's in Central Asia, okay, where all, kind of like where near all the stands are, all the little bitty countries, and it has a lot of different groups of people there, okay, so lots of different nations, and there are two countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan, that are bordering countries. They're neighbors, okay? And there is a group of Armenians that live in Azerbaijan, in the country of Azerbaijan, okay? And so Armenia naturally wants to include those Armenians that are across the border, and they want to annex that territory and make that a part of Armenia. But obviously Azerbaijan doesn't want to give up those people or give up that land. And so there has been war, kind of a stalemate, and there's not really a set answer to that example as it explains in your book. So for the Caucasus Mountain region, we'll say that there are Armenians, or the Armenian majority, in Azerbaijan. Baigan. Okay. And really, with irredentism, there can be lots of different outcomes. Okay, so sometimes it just ends in a stalemate. Sometimes they end up taking that new country, or taking that land, or sometimes that will break off and become a new country, which is kind of like what we saw the other day with all of our examples of devolution, right? A lot of the places and territories that we talked about the other day wanted full independence. So there's a lot of different outcomes that can happen from devolution and from irredentism specifically. Okay, so we'll put a question mark because we don't really know what's going to happen. There's not a for sure process there. Okay. The next and last piece that we have for devolution is shatter belts. This was a very quick blurb in your textbook, okay, but it's pretty important too. So a shatter belt is an unstable region that's located between two very different regions. And usually this is based on ethnic differences, based on ethno-linguistic differences. Okay, so when you have a lot of different nations, right, different groups of people living nearby, and then you try to put them in states, like in countries, right, there's a lot of problems that can arise. So sometimes this will lead to fragmentation, is what your book will call it. And a good example of this is Yugoslavia, which is not a country today. Okay. So you're going to watch two short little videos really quick about two NBA players who were actually from Yugoslavia. And we used to watch this SportsCenter 30 for 30 in class, but we just don't have time for it. But the first video, you'll kind of get the gist of like what happened between these two guys. So they were from Yugoslavia. Vlade is the guy you'll see talking, and his friend Drazen was Croatian. Vlade was Serbian. And so they like make it big in Europe playing basketball, right? Then they come over to the US. They both get drafted. They're still friends. And then in 1992 was when Yugoslavia started having all these nationalistic movements between all of the different people in this area. So if you look at the map that's on the slide, you can see this Balkan area. It's between Italy and Greece in Europe, and it's a very small area. I would say it's smaller than Texas, but there's all the different colors that you see are different nations, okay? So those are different groups of people. And on the left side from Slovenia, the blue, all the way down through the yellow and the pink and the green, down to the brown, and the purple, all of that was considered one country. So there's all of these different types of people living in this very small area, and all of these people started wanting their own country. And so Slovenia was the first one to kind of declare independence, and all of this fighting starts breaking out, okay? Well, in 1992, Vlade and Drazen go back to Europe to play like in the Europe Championships or like the World Championships or something. And so they're all playing on a Yugoslavian team. So at this point, there were not separate countries to have separate basketball teams. So they were playing for the country of Yugoslavia. They won. They won the championship. And after the game, there was a man, like a fan, who had a a Croatian flag that when they like stormed the court, he was like waving this Croatian flag around. And Vlade was like, oh, no, like, this is not a place for like politics. Basketball is not a place to represent politics. So he walks over and grabs the flag from the man and kind of throws it down without really thinking about it. And all of the media saw it, and the media. And so they took that and blew it up. And so they made Vlade look like he was this bad guy who didn't support the Croatians. And from Vlade's perspective, which is what he talks about in the 30 for 30, he was just like, no, like, I was trying to celebrate this win for the Yugoslavian team, not the different nationalistic movements that were happening. So anyways, long story short, his friend Drazen, who was playing on the team too, who was Croatian, really took that personally and thought that Vlade meant it, personally meant that he didn't like the Croatians or whatever. And so Drazen just completely drops Vlade. And so it's kind of the end of their friendship. And Vlade, of course, didn't want that, but Drazen took that action very personally. And so you'll kind of hear about that in the first video. And then in the second video, the SportsCenter interview, when they're talking to Vlade about the documentary that was made, Vlade kind of finishes out and tells you about how he like came to peace with that. So pause this video and then go over and watch those first two links, the Once Brothers link and then the SportsCenter Vlade link, and then you'll come back to me. So with all of this turmoil, it kind of led to the need for organizations for multiple countries to be involved in. That's where our supranational cooperation or organizations come into play, which we kind of looked at the other day, right? But these organizations are when states come together to form an organization to collectively, I spelled that right, collectively achieve greater benefits as a whole. For all members, okay? So it's going to be mutually beneficial, all right? But to be a part of these organizations, sometimes these members have to give up a little power of their own, like, sovereignty. Okay, so that's kind of the trade-off. The ones that you looked at the other day, remember I told you to look at 3 of them. There was NATO, right? We had NATO, which is a military alliance, which you should have read about the other day, so I'm not going to go into depth about that one. We had the UN, which consists of a lot of countries, right? And this one is really just all about peace and security. So kind of keeping everyone at bay to make sure we're not going to have World War III break out, okay? And the last one was the EU, which was the European Union, right? And this is a political and economic alliance within Europe, right? We talked about how there's open borders and free trade, and this agreement among most European countries, all right? But currently, you might have heard of Brexit happening, right? Great Britain trying to exit the EU, and that just has a lot of implications. And so I want you to, again, pause this video and go on over to the slide and watch that Brexit video that's linked there, and then you'll come back. So that's Brexit, and that is the relationship with the EU. So those are our big three organizations that you need to know, but there were also a few others that were listed in the course guide that you might not be as familiar with and that you need to know about. The first one is the ASEAN, maybe that's how you say it, Council, but really this one is basically just like the EU, but for Southeast Asian countries, okay? This was made in 1967, and the goal is for peace and prosperity. And it includes 10 Southeast Asian countries. Okay, another one is the African Union. I'm going to draw on the other side. Okay, and the African Union was created in 2002. And it was to create unity and cooperation to end colonialism for good and to encourage independence and also to help human rights. All right, so that's a lot of stuff right there, but it includes all of the African countries. Okay, so this one's a little bit newer, still working out some of those things, but it's a step in the right direction for Africa and those less developed countries. And then the one that I found the most interesting is called the Arctic Council. I had no idea this was a thing until I started researching it, but it's really pretty cool and much needed. So the Arctic Council is really just cooperation in the Arctic Circle. So think really high latitudes, okay, around the North Pole. There are several countries who have territory up there, okay? So there are, I think, 8 countries. So Canada, obviously, and the U.S., because we have Alaska up there. Russia, Denmark, because Denmark is kind of tied with Greenland, which is up there. Finland, Iceland, and Norway. Okay, so these are the permanent members, but then there are also indigenous groups that have like maybe a little less of a say, you could say, indigenous groups. So think like your Eskimos, like the groups of people who live way far up north, people who've been there for ages and ages. People actually live up there, and so they have given these groups a voice in this council, which is really interesting. And their big goals for this Arctic Council is to promote sustainable development and environmental protection. Okay, so think about marine life that's up there, and this idea of global warming and the ice caps melting. Like, there's just a lot of things that are happening up there. Then you have to think about like if there's oil up there, and so there's a lot of things that this Arctic Council kind of works for. And I found two pretty good videos. The first one that you're going to watch is a really quick, just kind of explanation of what the Arctic Council is and what it is used for. And then the second video is about the U.S. leadership in the council. So the U.S., or every 2 years, the council like leadership changes between these countries. And so from 2015 to 2017, the U.S. was in charge of like running these council meetings and stuff like that. And so you can see from these videos just kind of what it's about. I thought it was pretty cool. So pause my video, go over and watch those two videos, and then you'll come back. And the last thing we need to go over is voting boundaries. So this was a section in your book. When I read it, it was kind of confusing. So we need to talk about it. All right. So within voting boundaries, we need to go back to our very first unit. And do you remember talking about the census? Remember doing that whole census lesson I think it was like our very first lesson, actually. But remember, a census is what determines how many representatives each state gets, okay? Each state gets, and this is called reapportionment, another vocab term. Okay, so the census is what counts the population, right? Your demographics and where you live and how many people there are and whatnot. And so when that is done every 10 years, then the government will reapportion and decide how many representatives each state will get based on their population, okay? And then the other part to this is that they will decide how to draw district boundaries, okay? So once you figure out how many representatives you're going to get for each state, then you have to draw the boundaries to figure out who you're going to be voting for, kind of. So this is called redistricting. More vocab for you. Okay, so all of this can lead to this thing called gerrymandering, which sounds funny, because it is, but gerrymandering is when you redraw the districts to either remain in power or to gain power. Okay, so usually this is done by a political party, to kind of like almost, I mean, it sounds corrupt because it kind of is, to keep their power. Okay, so this is redrawing districts, usually by a political party. To remain in power. Or gain power. All right, so there's two big types. I think your book lists a few more, but we're only going to talk about two. The first one is packing. So I'm going to go up here. The first term is called packing. And packing, more vocab. Packing is when you try to pack in the opposition into as few districts as possible. Oh, that's right. Into as few districts as possible. Okay, so that kind of sounds confusing, but it's really not. All right, so I want you to draw a square. That is not a very good square. Okay, and I want you to think about just this little image here. Okay, so if the Democrats are in charge of redistricting, okay, and they decide to pack all the Republicans in one, they're gonna try to redraw the lines to where all of the Republicans are in one district right here, and have all the Democrats in the other districts. Okay, so that way they will give up just one district to the opposing party. That way they can't have multiple representation in other districts. The other idea here is called cracking. Okay, and this is when you split the opposition into several districts. So you're breaking them all up because you want to prevent them having a majority in any of those districts. So if you split them all up, then they can't win the majority votes. Okay, so this is going to look like this. You have, let's do it opposite this time. So let's say that the Republicans are drawing the lines, okay? And so they want to spread out all of the Democrats. Okay, so there might be one or two Democrats here. Maybe over here they have like 2 or 3 Democrats, but the Republicans are going to win the majority always in these districts. Okay, so same thing down here. You might have just 2 Democrats, and over here you might just have one. It's one loner. Okay, so you can see that the way they drew these lines is that the Democrats are split among all of these districts, and so the Republicans will have the majority. Okay, so they're just cracking the Democrats apart. Whereas in packing, you're packing the opposition into just one or a few districts, so you can have the majority in the others. Okay, So last thing is that there is one last video over gerrymandering. It came from the Unit 4 tic-tac-toe board. So you might have watched it, maybe not, but this one is a little bit longer. I think it's close to 4 minutes, but it does a good job of explaining these voting boundaries. So go back over to that slide and you'll watch that last video, and that's it for our notes today. So you'll take a picture of this and put it on your Google folder, and this will be the last thing on your Google folder. I will get you the table of contents for Unit 3 and for Unit 4 because I'll be checking those on Monday when you guys take your test. So whenever you finish this video, whenever you finish the other gerrymandering video, then you guys are free to start studying or making sure that you have everything in your Google folder. And don't forget that reading check over chapter 11 is due by Friday night at midnight, and the progress check is due by Friday night at midnight. So you have things to be working on. So use the rest of this class time to be productive. I will see you guys next week.